Hello everyone, and welcome back to DMG. Not too long ago, I showed you the HP PhotoSmart 618, a pretty competent early 2000s/late 90s camera, turned absolutely fascinating by its ability to run user-created scripts and compiled software. Now, today we're looking at its older cousin, the HP PhotoSmart 912, from the same series, but with a whole lot different body, similar hardware inside, but it has some fantastic and fascinating quirks that the 618 sure doesn't. So this is the HP 912. Let's get right into it, looking around the edges, looking at the hardware. So first thing you'll notice about this camera is its much larger body. This looks more like a point and shoot, whereas this looks more like a full DSLR and drink and shot. And I wouldn't actually hesitate too much to call this a full DSLR because of what capabilities it has, and we'll get into it later, but you can already see some of those capabilities that kind of put it a step above any other DigitalOS camera at the time. Here's our big lens with big zoom ring. The battery compartment seems uninteresting to show you until I actually show you why it is interesting. So, golly, that was loud. So if you take all the batteries out, you can release this cartridge. So it could either take 4 AA's through this adapter, or there was a rechargeable battery that could slot in. So that's a pretty unique feature. I haven't seen any other cameras of this age that have the option for either like standard batteries or a custom rechargeable battery. I actually really like that feature. For data transfer, it has a full-size USB-B port, 9-volt DC in, AV out. We're going to be using that later. Now, another interesting quirk is its screen. Its display flips up 90 degrees, and that's so if you're shooting at chest level, you can still see your screen. You can still see your shot on this display. On the topic of displays on top, there's also this far larger display, small LCD display, and that is because of the amount of customizable settings that this camera offers. Again, it's pretty close to being a full DSLR, so this is absolutely needed to show all of those user-changed settings. Pop-up flash on top. This is extremely bright. That is a remarkably effective flash bulb. What else? Infrared transmitters and receivers. Some of these are for focus, and some of these are for jet send capability. That is, IRDA, basically. Wirelessly beaming your photos through magic to a printer or computer. And finally, mine still has the original sticker that tells us a little bit about it. 2.24 megapixels, Pentax optics, and the 2/3 inch CCD. That's about 16 millimeters. So this is somewhat near half frame. That's a bit larger CCD than the HP 618 offered. So the HP 618 offered a 10-ish millimeter CCD. This steps it up to 16. So while the two have very similar seeming capabilities on paper, 2 megapixels, 3 times optical zoom, built by Pentax, you'll see later in the photos that this does look a little bit different. Back to built by Pentax really quickly before we get into the software. This was also sold as the Pentax EL2000, whereas the 618 was sold as the EL200. So yes, this was actually completely built by Pentax. HP just did the software. Now let's talk about that software, because it is very similar to the PhotoSmart 618, that being that it runs the Flashpoint Digita operating system. And to look at that software, I'm going to use my new toy. So this is an example of what your support to my channel allows me to buy. This is a Sony DV Direct machine. basically a VCR but for DVDs. So I can plug this camera straight into it over the official original HP video cable. So I've added a third piece of Sony hardware to my set now, but now that my camera is plugged into this magic box, I probably shouldn't have an exhaust fan pointing straight at my microphone. Now that my camera is plugged into this magic box, I can record the UI for you. So in the photo mode, I just went ahead and enabled the menu in photo mode. Its interface looks very similar to that of the 618 at first impression. You can just change your capture settings here, but then there are so many more settings here. You have autofocus range, that being macro or mid-range or infinite, white balance, AE metering. These were both on the 618. But yeah, you also have some options that weren't on the 618, like focus lock. And the ISO speed settings, you can go all the way down to 25, which is a crazy low ISO, even for a camera of this age. But setting it down to 25 ISO allows for long exposure shots that you cannot do on the 618, which only goes down to ISO 100. All these settings are the same. This is just image stamp, so putting text in the bottom right corner. And that's just your basic utilities. So let's get back to the actual shooting itself. We'll turn on our display on the camera, and there's our live preview. There's my DV Direct machine, and it'll create an infinite loop if I show you the screen here. So the live preview is pretty snappy. It's faster than that on the HP 618, and this has the same processor, but it's clocked a little bit higher, and I'll show you how it performs in a benchmark later. But there's our live preview. It is pretty responsive. Wiggling my hand around, and you can see how it compares here. Now you can also go into program mode, and this is not an aspect of the UI that I can show you, but in program mode, this is where that little display really comes in handy. So you can set your exposure compensation, and you can set your AE all through tiny buttons right here. And on the other side is this little scroll wheel, and that's how you change the options. So that's how you set your exposure compensation and your aperture. So it's actually a fantastic design, having the button to change the settings right here and the dial to scroll through the settings right on the other side of the camera on this grip. This camera is built for people with larger hands than me. They don't quite fit all the way around the shape of this curve here, but if I wasn't a twink, I think I could hold it pretty well. So I won't dock points for their design here. Now back to the camera itself. We're going to turn on this live preview again so I can show you the zoom. So rotating this ring does the zoom, and you might be able to hear the zoom is motorized. So this isn't a true zoom ring like you get on a camera like the Sony NEX VG20, where you can precisely position your lens absolutely anywhere you want it. This is a fake focus ring. It triggers a digital switch. And I say it's a digital switch because it's either on or it's off. There isn't any nuance. So if you just turn it a tiny, tiny little bit, it'll still zoom the same amount as if you just cranked it all the way to the side. So that is a complaint. I honestly would have rather just had telephoto and wide zoom buttons right here on the body as the 618 did, because having a zoom ring that still just triggers a mechanism that isn't very precise. It's just more steps for the same effect. Although something I really do like is this is a mirrored camera. It has a through-the-lens viewfinder, and this is one of the reasons why I say it's pretty damn close to being a DSLR. One of the other reasons was all those features that I talked about earlier. It has a through-the-lens viewfinder. I unfortunately can't really show that to you very well, but oh wait, I know how I can. So this is the only Digita OS camera that has a through-the-lens viewfinder. Therefore, I wouldn't hesitate to call it the only Digita OS DSLR. Okay, don't do this with your camera, by the way, but I'm shining this flashlight into the viewfinder, and you can see it through the lens. So that's your proof that the PhotoSmart 912 has a through-the-lens viewfinder. The through-the-lens viewfinder also has a very small LED backlit LCD display at the bottom that, if you're in program mode, shows your current aperture settings. And again, I'm sorry, you're gonna just have to take my word for that because my lens can't focus right to shoot down the viewfinder, but that is a feature that would really only appear in much later DSLRs. So I absolutely commend them for doing that. This is fantastic. But when we're talking about cameras, who the hell cares about photography? That is not interesting. What we're here for is the software. So we're gonna slot in a compact flash card. This can take Type 2, by the way, but it still doesn't take IBM micro drives because that would be too cool and they couldn't make it too awesome. So if we open our menu here under photo mode, then we can run our scripts. Now, camera info, here we go. So this camera is very well loved. This is the highest shutter count I've ever seen on one of this era, let alone a Digita OS camera. 38,000 is pretty crazy. And I only added about 200 to that count. I haven't been using this too much. So, you know, its condition isn't the best, probably as you've been noticing, because someone actually, like, used this a whole lot until it was just no longer functional. And unfortunately, to fix it, I had to remove the, like, plastic insert over the D-pad because it was cracked and it was inputting incorrect buttons. So when you went one way, it would go the other way. So I did have to make that quick fix. And I did have to reconnect some cables and clean out some dust. But yeah, this camera still works fine. So how much RAM do we have? We have 12 megabytes of free RAM. So that's a little bit more than on the 618. And now Flashmark. So I mentioned that this uses the same processor as the 618, but it's clocked a bit higher. So I'm going to run our benchmark here, and you're going to see just how crazy fast the CPU is. Sometimes it hits over 100, triple digits, and it's the only CPU in a Digita camera I've ever seen hit triple digits. Yes, 101. We scored 101 points. So it is insanely fast, and there is a good reason that is needed. Because if we go into our image capture settings, this can do another thing that the 618 can't. File type TIFF. So this can shoot completely uncompressed photos. Now, they do take a little longer to process, and you can't shoot multiple and save them in like a RAM buffer like you can with JPEG, so they process in the background while you're taking other photos. With TIFF, it takes about 1.5 seconds after shooting to process, which is not bad at all. There's nothing wrong with that. I've had much worse processing times on much newer cameras. And, well, finally, let's swap out our card, and I'll show you how fast that CPU is with something this camera was never meant to do. We're going to scroll over to our compiled applications. Again, if you want an explanation of these terms, watch my video on the 618. We'll switch over to the compiled applications and run the Doom for Digita port, which the 618 runs competently, but this runs even better. Unfortunately, the button layout on the 912 makes it a lot less convenient to actually, like, play. Oh, wait. Oh, to shoot, I have to turn the zoom ring to the left. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can, like, turn it with my fingers while I play on the D-pad. Okay, but the frame rate is better. It is running better. It's challenging to play with the messed up D-pad. I apologize for the... Wow, nice voice crack. I apologize for the brightness changing. I don't know what's going on there. A bit bizarre. I've never seen that happen. I think the... Oh, yeah, it's just the AV cable. So we'll walk over to our door here, and I think I have to turn the zoom ring to the right to... Yep, to open it. Shoot him. Oh, God, this is actually amazing. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, God. Okay. Turn right. Okay, did I get him? I think I might have gotten him. Okay, at least he's no longer on my screen. Oh, no, he just went somewhere else. Oh, boy. Okay. This is the worst way to play Doom. Oh, God. Oh, it's a fella. It's a fella. Again, reminder that it's really hard for me to turn. I'm not just bad at games. So, I'm sure it would be a little more pleasant if my D-pad wasn't tacked, but it didn't occur to me until now that I would have to turn the zoom ring, because the shoot and action buttons are bound to the zoom in and out keys, and that works really well on the Photosmart 618. So, you know, your movement controls are right here, and your shooting and action are right here. That works very poorly on the 912, where your movement controls are here, and your shooting controls are here. I did not think about that, and I'm very glad that we got to witness that for the first time together. But speaking of things you're gonna witness, let's look at some photos, because that's what this is actually meant for. So here I have a couple images, and you'll notice that the TIFFs look a little messed up. The previews in File Explorer look awful, and that is because these are stored as a 2-page TIFF, with the second being a tiny thumbnail file, and the first being the actual image, so that the camera doesn't need to process the full, like, 6 megabyte almost TIFF file every time it loads its, like, file previews. So the full resolution is 1600 by 1280, and that produces pretty crisp and clear photos. Again, you have to zoom in somewhat far to begin to see dithering and a little bit of crust around the edges of things. It would look fine on decent quality prints. Things without hard defined edges, like, say, clouds, are captured quite well by this camera. But when something does have a point at which it sharply ends, like, for example, these leaves, it doesn't look so great. But that is to be expected of all cameras with a 2-megapixel sensor. That is by no means a failure. There's a kitty. There's a little kitty. Here's what the flash looks like. So the flash is it's a little blue, unfortunately. It really washes out the photos with blueness. And I mean, it's a cat. What else can I say? There is a little bit of halo around the subject here. There's some more flash cat photos. Oh, that's scary as hell. Okay, this is a pretty good one. So, in scenes with sharp contrast, so this is a pretty good one. It's a great photo until you look a little deeper, and then you see these lines. These bizarre little lines. And unfortunately, it does produce those in low light. You also see these CCD dead pixels here, but that's not like, that wasn't a factory thing. That just happens to CCD sensors as they age. So the sky is a little washed out, and this, I mean, the landscape isn't too dark, but it's too dark for the camera to know what to do with it. That's a pretty good shot. I like this, but the contrast between the foreground and the background causes the brighter background to be washed out a bit, especially in the sky. So it doesn't do well with like super high contrast scenes. Oh yes, there's its macro. And its macro images look pretty good. It is focused on the end of the lens here. This is my Photosmart 945 camera. Well, as you can see if you have eyes. Its macro images look pretty good, but they are washed out by the flash. And then they're given this like strange tint. This like yellowish greenish tint to compensate for the blue flash. So in processing, the camera tries to compensate and adds that funky little look. So resolution and clarity-wise, they're good, but they're not that good color-wise. Oh, we've got a transistor radio here. So again, macro mode. Text is pretty clear and visible. RS7315, that's easy to read. Yeah, so text is clear and visible in macro, but once again, that flash, if you catch it at the wrong angle, it's way too bright. Okay, here's some more outside photos, and these I took on auto mode. And these are, the ones I've been showing you have all been JPEGs since those first two TIFFs, as you can see by the file size down here. So they look a little washed out and blurry. And I would suspect that's because I'm focusing on a dark subject, and the camera doesn't know what to do between the dark subject and the super bright, like, sunlight around it. So I do have a feeling that the camera just didn't know how to handle this at all. So these would definitely need tweaking in post. These are fine photos. I mean, they capture detail very well. They capture the shine on the fur just fine, but they're just too bright. So you definitely do need to switch it over to like program or manual mode and turn down that exposure compensation a little bit. I mean, yeah, look, these are great photos except for the fact that they're too bright. And that's been my complaint with a lot of them from the 912. They're just a little washed out. I love this one. So while I was shooting these, I was on f-stop 3.9, 124 ISO. That's funny. Okay. These are some fantastic photos. I just wish that the colors were better. Oh, we've got some chips here. So again, like shots with a lot of text, this is super clear. This looks really good for a 2 megapixel sensor. And in something that doesn't have a lot of color, it comes across that the sensor is actually quite excellent. It's clear, it's sharp, the optics in the sensor are fantastic. But in many scenes, the camera just does not know how to handle color and contrast. So you have to know that, and you have to compensate for it. Okay, these I shot on ISO 25 outside, and this was like middle of the night, pitch black. So you get a whole lot of CCD fuzz, like an unbelievable amount of CCD crust here, and there is some JPEG compression crust too, but I mean, it's like confetti over the whole image. So early CCD sensors were just not built for low light whatsoever, and the fact that it has a pretty small lens does not help either. So it doesn't do well in low light. Now here, I have on my archive drive a lot more TIFF photos, and I initially shot most of my test photos as TIFF, but unfortunately Windows does not handle these very well because, again, they are 2-page TIFF files, meaning that there are 2 images stored, there we go, stored within the same file. So in indoor shots, the flash does wash things out, as discussed. Yeah, you lose a lot of details, and flash over brightness isn't something you can really compensate for in any sort of settings. Okay, here's another outside shot. I think this is a little too bright. That's just in my opinion. The sky and the trees contrast is just fine, but the field could use a little more detail. And again, for a 2 megapixel sensor, this is pretty sharp, this is pretty clear. The super nice Pentax optics, of course, contribute to that. Sorry, I accidentally scrolled to the next one. Like, you can, if you zoom in, you can kind of make out, like, tips of grass in the field. It's pretty good for a 2 meg sensor. Here's another area with a darker foreground and a bright background. Camera can't handle it. Oh, that's so much better. Wow. The, if you'll excuse my pun, contrast between these two is amazing. Like, super blue, super washed out, bad contrast. Incredible. This is a good photo. That one's a little blurry, so I'd say I shot that without flash when I should have. Here's a flashless outdoor macro, and it focused on this part of the petal rather than the center. But it's a decent photo. There's some... no, that's bad. Okay, that's good. That's really good, actually. Once again, focusing further towards the back, but you catch this little spider web. So the detail is really good. When this camera pulls through, it produces solid photos. But unfortunately, sometimes the stars don't align. Decent, horrible, 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 horrible. Okay, okay. Oh, that's pretty good. That is probably the best macro that this camera has produced, because both the lighting and the contrast, as well as the details and color, are captured well. We have some more pretty good macros here. Well, just these two. Just these two look solid. Okay, that one's blurry, but this one, okay, that's a good cat photo. This is a good TIFF cat photo. I actually do quite like this one. It's a little fuzzy. Not the cat, the image. You get some of that CCD fuzz in the dark patches. So the camera, again, I shot this on auto, I would assume, because it looks like this was shot on a higher ISO. Because you get that fuzz in darker patches. Ooh, okay. So that's a good one. Okay, that's all I have to show you of the PhotoSmart 912. So it has some really, really fascinating software on top of some really crazy hardware. It's, I wouldn't hesitate to call it a full DSLR, because the only thing it lacks in that category is a swappable lens. It has all the other hallmarks of a DSLR. It has the hot shoe, crazy amount of customizable settings through the lens viewfinder. And on top of that, it runs Digita OS better than any other camera that ever did, with its ridiculously fast processor and loads of RAM. So it's a fantastic camera, but unfortunately sometimes its photos look a little washed out and a little colorless. So you do need to know when to compensate with that. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up. So I hope you all enjoyed. Again, thank you so much for my supporters, and those of you who have been subscribed for a while. You make all of this possible. But yes, I hope you enjoyed, and I have lots of similar videos. I hope you'll go and watch one of those next.